How does it get on all like Five Eye Collective, Hawaii Ponui? Is that all Maile?
Yes. So
Nice.
I'm cross-posting. Yeah.
Kanaiokana.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right, we are live and I hit open the room.
Shall I hit the blue button?
Yes, can you hit it? Because I hit it and it doesn't look like it did anything. Mahalo.
Aloha nui kākou, aloha and welcome to a new episode of ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa. We've got an evening of sharing and teachings for you. We're really excited about the program tonight. ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa is an all-volunteer hui of wahine representing multiple generations and all working in some capacity to serve the community. This new season is presented with the support of our sponsors, Hawaii People's Fund, Oiwi Television, Papo'ololokahi, the University of Hawaii, Roots Program at Kokua Kalihi Valley, Ho'ulu Aina in the back of Kalihi with Kokua Kalihi Valley, and Ko'olau Aina Momona. My name is Kim Ku'ule Burney, and I'll be serving as moderator tonight, but I don't anticipate having to talk too much because we've got some really great panelists. A couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed. It will be archived on the ahawahine.org page website. Which is where you registered, and it will also be archived across ʻAha Wahine's Facebook page. If you have questions throughout the session, please put them in the question and answer panel at the bottom of your Zoom link, or if you're watching on Facebook, please put them in the comment section and we will have a chance to take a look at them. An evaluation will be sent to you at the close of the webinar and then tomorrow to all those who have attended. So without any more delay, mahalo for joining us this Thursday evening, and welcome to another summer episode of ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa. Tonight's program is entitled He Lālā Ulu, Lāhui Empowerment Through Cultural Birth Practices. I'd like to introduce to you our speakers, Ka'iolani Odom and Puni Jackson of Kalāhui o Kapo with KKV, and Wahine Hula Ka'eo with Kalao Ke Kahuli. So let me start with the introductions. Our first two speakers will be from Kokua Kalihi Valley. Sharon Ka'iolani Odom is the director of the Returning to Our Roots program at Kokua Kalihi Valley, which is a federally qualified health center. That program oversees the Roots Cafe and the Food Hub. She's also a Lomi Lomi practitioner, a registered dietitian, a public health educator, a hula practitioner, and founder of several grassroots, culture-based, and place-based programs that serve the greater community. Joining Ka'iu is going to be Puni Jackson, the director of Ho'ulu Aina, a 100-acre nature preserve dedicated to cultural education and community transformation, nestled in the back of Kalihi Valley and cared for by Kokua Kalihi Valley Federally Qualified Health Center. She is also a practitioner, an accomplished artist, and founder of several founder and co-founder of several grassroots culture and place-based programs, a couple of which we will have the opportunity to talk about tonight. Our third presenter will be Wahine Hula Ka'eo. She is a ko'okua, or birth and postpartum doula from Waiōhuli, Maui, a proud graduate of Kekula Kaiapuni o Maui and a former preschool teacher at Punanaleo o Maui. She is co-founder of Kalao o Kekahuli, a nonprofit organization that supports Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander families by providing culturally based prenatal, birth, and postpartum education and services. Welcome to all of you, Wahine. And let's start with you, Ka'iu. Can you give us a little bit of background of what we're going to be talking about tonight?
We're going to really be talking about the bringing back of our cultural practices and traditions, and really empowering our couples to use whatever practices that they feel called to within their birth. And we started this probably 15 years ago. It was Puni reminded me the other night when we were talking that we were at a retreat in Punalu'u, and we were with a group called Hui Mauliola, and the women were given the kuleana of really looking into our cultural birth practices, because what we realized is that within just a couple of generations that a lot of it had been lost. And as we started to do our research, to do our interviews, to really look into this, we were just meeting at different houses once a month, sharing what we knew, and then going on to the next step. But what we really committed to is that for all of us as Wahine Native Hawaiian women, that reborn into each of us is Haumea. And we are connected to her in so many ways. But for Puni and I, we work in Kalihi. The lands that surround us are of Haumea, and our work is of Haumea, and that we're really dedicated to preserving the cultural integrity, the protocols, and the ceremonies, and all of the knowledge that we're collecting around birth. As we started to do classes, as we started to train practitioners, we also went to other more Western type trainings. And, you go to the class and you complete the so many hours and you get your certificate that you've now become this. And that's a little bit different from what we have been doing over the past 15 years, is that we have been immersing ourselves into the practice, and we're still learning. I do want to say that is that we're constantly learning, but that we are committed to keeping our practices as they were, to learning all we can, but to helping our couples, and also to help grow practitioners so that what once was lost can live again, but it lives again with the integrity that our kupuna left for us, and with the knowledge that left for us. So what we're going to be talking about today is that this takes form in a lot of different ways. Puni and I run a program, Wahine Hula runs a program, and there's a lot of need in our community. Once we started to present on some of the things we were finding, we had a lot of couples come up to us and say, how do we learn more about this? We want to, come to classes. And we started classes, and we over the time, it's changed a little bit. And we started off with only 6 classes, but they wanted more and more information. And so we now do a 9-class session. We've done practitioner training. We have done talks out in the community. And what we found that we were very lucky as a group, as Hui Maoliola and the group that we had formed, is that we had people that were not only dedicated, but knowledgeable in certain areas, and that we were able to work together to provide these sessions, to provide this learning opportunity. And as we started to want this to happen in other communities, we realized what a special group we had, and that it's not that easy. We have Lomi and Ho'oponopono and Aipono, and, just all of these different practices where we come together as a group to offer them to our community. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about what we've been up to over the 15 years, what Wahine Hula's group, which is a newer group, and we're so excited that to have her and some, that they're starting on Maui and they're able to offer services and little different services, and that we really want to support each other, that there's so much work to be done that, anyway, we just want to share tonight. So that's where we're headed.
It all starts with Haumea, doesn't it? We all begin with Haumea. I have a lot of questions. I definitely want to know what your 9-10 classes involve, each of those sessions. But you also mentioned, before we get to the classes that you offer, you said that you have the classes for couples, for families, I should say, but you also have practitioner training. What is that? Is that for Hawaiian healing practitioners or for birth practitioners, or both?
When we first started off, we used to have this weekend session, and we would go through all of the different parts of our classes, and really anyone that has a role. So whether it's growing the plants that we need for La'au, or whether you're a Lomi or a La'au practitioner, or maybe you're a Hawaiian nurse in a hospital, and that you're supporting our Hawaiian mothers, then you had a place in our class. Like we needed to infiltrate in all areas. And so we were doing these weekend classes, and then we realized, and what we wanted was, we wanted them to find an area that they really wanted to delve more into, and then we would continue to support the training. What we found over time was that what we were growing was a lot of practitioners that were helping their families, and that was great. Like they were getting the knowledge, they were helping within their families for the birth, but we were actually really looking to support another group, like not exactly like ours, of course, whatever your community needs, that's how you want to form yourself, but that there would be more of these on different islands. And we started going to the other islands, and then COVID hit, and actually, I want to say before COVID, what we started to do was, instead of doing these weekend things, where we'd have twice monthly classes, and one class a month would be something more practical. So we would, be learning about just different parts all along through the birth spectrum. But the second class of the month would be to look into our historical documents that were written in Olelo, Hawaii. So our newspapers, any of the writings. And so Makana at that time was helping us, and we'd get these articles, and then we would hand them out before class, and then we would read them, or we would go through parts, or we would identify really interesting things, whether it came from Mo'olelo, or whether it came from Kapiolani Hospital, or whether it came from La'au documentation. These were written by our kupuna in their language, and we would go through those. And so we were meeting twice a month as practitioners, and we continued to do it for a bit after COVID, but that just threw everybody's schedule, and it's something that we're looking to get back to, but we haven't quite done it yet.
That's beautiful research and training, and that you have a group that you do it with, and it's lasted as long as it has. I just love that idea. So Puni, can you tell us a little bit more about what the workshops with the families offer? What's held in the different classes? What topics do you cover?
Yeah, sure. We do a ho'olauna. We start with the ho'olauna, and it's one way to kind of get used to each other and understand what it is that we're going to cover, but it actually sets up a sort of sacred space with the families. Oftentimes, people are meeting each other for the first time. They're kind of like getting to know each other, and what I love is that a lot of people don't realize, they think that this is just like a Bradley method, or I'm doing this instead of Lamaze or something. And in that ho'olauna session, what we really do is go deep and help to identify the Lāhui, your kuleana Lāhui, how you are part of a Lāhui, and this kuleana of birthing with our kupuna practices is part of being connected to each other and connected to a longer continuum of ike and aina, and that we are part of that aina through our, kino haumea. And that is, I think it's really a nice opening. It's an eye-opening moment for many of our families, because, oftentimes a family member will be there like, I don't know, I'm just here because she needed help or whatever. But over time, they realize like, well, I'm here because I care about the Lāhui Hawaii. This is a part of my commitment to make a difference for Hawaii. And you don't even realize that you can make a difference from that tiniest moment, from that first moments of birth. From there, we go into an aipono session. Ka'iulani does an amazing job of bringing all of the different aipono, aikupuna that are specific to pregnancy into the class so that you can actually learn with yourselves as well as through the mana'o, as well as through the mo'olelo. We do a ho'oponopono session that is not really a kukuluku mohana session at all, but it is sort of building the groundwork, the basics, the foundation for families to kind of reclaim the tools to keep that the balance within their families, their homes, their relationships, and even within themselves. So we do that through mo'olelo. All of the classes are pretty mo'olelo heavy. We do a breastfeeding class that's always a fun one. You can ask any question that you ever wanted to ask about breastfeeding, which is, I've always been surprised by the curiosities, and it's a really important way to reclaim that space as in your body, and that sort of like making sure that the baby is receiving the ono of the me'ai kupuna, so you might think you're just trying to be a good mom and nurse, but actually that whole process of breastfeeding is about aloha and connection. And we worked at first with Mele Kalama in that session, and always learned a lot from her about how she holds aloha and aivayu. And then Ka'iu's work in aipono and nutrition is just really important, because every new generation is sort of held in the baby as you're nursing. And so once again, it's about kuleana, but and looking back, kind of looking at the big picture. We do one section that's called Kuleana Kane, and we have Kihei Nahale'a come and tell stories about, particularly his story of reclamation of our practices around Ieve. Yeah, and actually Layana Wang also has been not only a parent in the class, but one of our kumu for the Kuleana Kane section, talking about Oli Inoa and just that launa of the mākua kane with the keiki. It's such an important realm of birth that often in colonial structures for family and other cultural structures for family, to understand what the Kuleana Kane is specific to our own Native Hawaiian culture is pretty important. So we spend a whole class on that. What am I forgetting? Lomi Lomi and La'aulapa'au. Those each have their own sections. Love Chance is our La'aulapa'au practitioner who does a walkthrough up here at Ho'olu'aina, and all of the families have the opportunity to learn the basic La'aulapa'au that goes along with pregnancy and birth. But also that there's the opportunity to learn Ho'olu'aina as your base. Maybe you need that La'aulapa'au base. And that, for harvest and or for stock, it's important that the ohana have that opportunity to perpetuate, not just like you going to the pharmacy, but perpetuate like farmers. And then, of course, Lomi Lomi, we have Kamaile Pua'oi often does our Lomi Lomi class, and it's really beautiful. I hate to give away a secret, but I want to give away the secret that that we always start the Lomi Lomi class like this, have this idea that we have this sacred body of Haumea that is pregnant, and we're learning all of the ways to touch and bring peace and harmony and connection. But over time, what happens is at the end of the class, we switch positions, and the ohana member that is providing Lomi Lomi for the Wahine Hapai is the person to receive. And that's a really powerful way, because then the relationship is not just about sort of a self-care or a, pampering. It's actually about building generational and ohana relationships. And then I always my favorite class, of course, is we do a birth plan, brainwaves, and labor session, where we really go through what are the stages of labor, what are we going to be breathing like, what are we going to be moving like, what does it feel like, partners, how do you recognize, what kind of questions are super maikai, what kind of questions are maybe not that maikai, and we go through how to touch, how to support, how to read nonverbal cues. And in that session and in another session, I'm always grateful to share some of the images that were shared with us from the many wahine over the last 15 years who have given birth within the context of Kalahuia Kopo. And, it's super common still for people to have only seen birth on like a Hollywood style movie. And the screaming and the chaos and the rush to the, all of that is just all not even a thing. It doesn't have to be anyway. And so it's really cool to show mana wahine, wahine Hawaii, giving birth in all of our different contexts, in the hospital, in the forest, laboring at the park, with a lot of people in the room, with nobody in the room, doing it well, doing it hard, all the different ways, because that's the thing. And that's why we wanted to name this session He Lālā Ulu, from that oli that talks about the kino, the many kino of Haumea, so reborn in all Hawaiian women, this practice or this connection to Haumea, there's all different ways to get there. And so those are our sessions. It's a lot.
Beautiful. Right. And I know that every time I hear of a young Hawaiian family expecting a baby, I always call up Kai'ua and say, when is your next class? Or do you have a class, starting soon, and try to get them in there. So we have a couple of comments that have been coming in from Facebook, and mahalo nui, kia ora to those who are watching from Aotearoa, from Kula, from Punalu'u, and in particular, our own Mahealani, Jamie Miller is also part of this ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa. So, aloha to you. But most importantly, mahalo for these programs. My ohana was able to participate with my daughter's last pregnancy and birth. So, our own families are a part of this, and I know that there's still more stories to emerge, and we want to hear all those. So you are training, your training practices, you're training, the stories, and teaching our families what our traditions were. But hula, Wahine Hula Ka'eo from Maui, you're actually helping to catch babies. Is that right?
Hi. Well, in different I guess I played different roles in different birth spaces. But yeah, aloha mai kākou o wau keia o wahine hula ka'eo, no waio huli maui mai au, mahalo no ke kono ana mai ia'u, ia kalau ke kahuli, mahalo ho'i ia olua, ia oko, ka po'e nā lako I vai mua I keia ala no mākou, nā poki'i e ho'ola ho I keia mau, keia ike ku'una ka hānau o ka ho'ohānau keiki. So aloha, my name is Wahine Hula Ka'eo, and I am one of the founders of Kalao Ke Kahuli, along with Malia Kaupe and Iolani Antonio, Kalamai, Iolani Brosio, Wamale Oya. I think she's on here as well, watching. But we are a nonprofit organization that was formed in 2020, which was, as we all know, a very interesting year. And it really kind of came out of our not just want, but need for a space to, you know, talk to each other and, you know, be able to vent to each other because, you know, we experience different experiences in and out of the hospital, being birth workers, being birthing people. And so, you know, after like, I think we all had like one FaceTime and we were like, okay, what are we gonna do? Like, do we just wanna do like a little collective? Like maybe we can halavai a couple of months. And I don't even know how we came to the conclusion of nonprofit, but the next time we met, you know, we have so much talent just within our little hui. You know, I had a logo, Iolani had like all of our writing things done, our mission statement. Malia was like knowledgeable in nonprofit stuff. And so we just started. And the one thing that I think we all had in common was, you know, we are all in different spaces in our own practice, but we really wanted to eliminate that barrier between birth workers or ko'okua, ʻAha Wahine, and our community. And so we wanted to eliminate those socioeconomic and cultural barriers that obstructed our community from access, you know, to quality, culturally based prenatal birth and postpartum services. And so, yeah, we kind of just started doing it. And, you know, right after we started, COVID hit. And so the physical actual support kind of, you know, evolved throughout the past couple of years. And so the first year I was only attending home births because I wasn't allowed in the hospital. Same thing with Malia. Io has done postpartum stuff for us. We were doing a lot of virtual like support groups or just talk story sessions to create spaces where our birthing people could just ask questions and we could talk about childbirth ed. We were doing childbirth education classes on Zoom because people, you know, didn't necessarily have access to the run-of-the-mill, you know, hospital birthing, childbirth ed classes. And so they were looking for something else. And so everything kind of just evolved from one thing to another based on really the needs of our community. And that, you know, that included at first, you know, we were really going to be just Maui based, but during COVID, since we were doing so much virtual stuff, we were doing virtual ko'okua support. Like I was on FaceTime at people's births, talking to their partners and their moms. And so we've been really blessed by, you know, the support of our community. And I think although COVID was, you know, stressful in terms of, you know, I cannot go to the hospital this week, but next week I can. So, you know, always things were always just tumultuous and changing. But I think if it wasn't for COVID, I think the growth in the demand for you know, services and support outside of just the Western medical system or outside of just the hospital, I don't think we would have gotten that big of a response.
Yeah, the demand, a lot of people went virtual, right? Went online. Well, congratulations. And I know you said that it has benefited you, but it's another example of reciprocal relationships that Puni mentioned earlier. You certainly are serving the community as well. So it's, you know, it's a mutual relation, it's mutually beneficial relationship. And I think that's just beautiful. We have a few more alohas, our Ikela, who's also from Maui, aloha all around from Wai'ehu and Wahiawa and Halawa and Minneapolis, holy moly, and Northland, Aotearoa and Halawa and Ko'olau on Maui. So mahalo to everybody who's joining us. So the number one question we have is, how do I sign up for these classes? So of course, now that the word is out or getting out. And I would say it's out because, you know, I mentioned earlier that every time I know of a family, I call Ka'io and sometimes she says, oh, well, I think we're at capacity. So I know that you guys are reaching capacity these days. What is capacity? How many families in a group do you take per session? And I guess we'll start with with Kalihi, but then, you know, Hula, I'm interested in how your classes have gone too.
So we are looking at 10 couples per class. We've tried to up it to like 15 or 16 just because the demand is there, and it just doesn't work when we're creating that intimate space, when we're trying to give everybody the time to share and to really to build that pilina. You know, it's so funny. We didn't start it, but our couples actually started calling themselves cohorts because they became so close to each other that they were a cohort that was going to move along together. And so we realized early on that, you know, part of the real benefit of this class was building this community and strengthening the connections to each other. When we got into COVID, I was so resistant to doing the class by Zoom. Like, I really believed in the power of us all coming together and, you know, sitting in a circle every week and sharing food every week. Just as a side note for our classes, one of the things we did was we provided the first 2 meals, but then we asked the couples to connect with another couple and to provide just one of the meals for the classes. And didn't have to be fancy. It didn't have to, you know, it just needed to be aipono and whatever, you know, you could do aipono. And what happened was that, you know, we started getting some really amazing meals, you know, from fish off of Lanai to, you know, another chef really bringing, but it was all just really good food. And so the couples kind of saw this as kind of like a date night, you know, they get to get away, they're learning together, they have all this time. And so the idea of doing it on Zoom was just not appealing to me at all. I thought, no, we can't. And then we, you know, I talked to Puni and we decided, well, you know, this isn't going away, so let's do Zoom. And we found that there was still this sense of intimacy of being on a Zoom in someone's living room every single week. And so we did that, and we found too that we could, you know, usually we were just doing couples on Oahu, but we were able to actually reach all of the islands. We've had couples from Molokai, Hawaii, Maui, Kauai, as few from the that had just recently moved to the mainland. And so that was nice for a couple of years, is that we were able to reach, you know, much more than we would normally reach. And then just this past class, we did kind of a hybrid, half Zoom, half in person, you know, like our La'au class that was outside and some of that. And then we're probably moving, you know, more to in-person classes again. But right now we only can do 3 sessions a year because each session is 9, you know, so we're looking at almost, you know, 3 months to run a session, and the energy and the amount of work it takes to hold space for that. We can only do 3 a year. And when we start cutting it off about 10, 11, 12, because something always happens where 1 or 2 couples doesn't work out or they drop out. And so, and we don't advertise at all. You know, it's all purely by word of mouth. And every session we're filled up.
One thing that I was excited about this session was that we had one couple who, one Ohana, who was also a patient of Wahine Hula's. And so even though Kai'u and I, we have a team of practitioners that we're a part of, that Kalahuiako, there's several practitioners that we're a part of, but it's not enough for us to do more than 3 sessions per year at this time. But the idea that Wahine Hula and the work that you're doing on Maui, and the idea that we could even be supporting the same ohana, you know, to get that really deep support for even just that one ohana was always really powerful to me. And I also was really surprised by the intimacy of Zoom, because people were like in their beds or in their living room, and it's really cute, you know, the positions, they really go for it because they're at home, whereas you know, in the clinic space they might try a little bit if they're brave, but at home they're trying every position and they're really getting into it. So I had a chance to do the labor and positions class in person this year, but I said, let's just keep it in their living rooms because they do a good job. But Wahine Hula, you're the ohana that we had in common. That was really a dream come true, because like Kai'u said, we really imagined that this new, you know, every new cohort of practitioners would be able to then host additional this kind of class in their own communities. And even though you know, your classes are a little bit different or your services are different, I think it's really nice that we have that overlap for the Lāhui.
It is. I can definitely see the advantages. And also I'm hoping that maybe practitioners from other islands will come and learn from you, because wouldn't it be nice? I mean, Maui has this now. What wouldn't it be nice if there were similar programs on all islands? Are you seeing it?
We've done it in the Big Island. So Hawaii Island has a assembly of Aina practitioners, cultural practitioners, healthcare practitioners, and midwives. They actually have a pretty active midwife community on that island. And so you and I have been working with them for a couple of years now. But what's interesting is that you really must know your cultural practice well to be able to do the work. And so we're learning that it takes a while for the practitioner to be ready to take it to the next level and to hold that space for many families.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Lālā has a group of practitioners up there, and Liana Honda through Queens. We've been working, and over time, it takes it does take a community to really help these practitioners to grow and to get to the point where they want to be providing services, but that they have the skills and knowledge and the cultural background to be able to do that. And so it does take a while. We thought we could do it over, a couple of weekends in the beginning. We're like, we'll just put them together and we're going to teach them all this stuff, and they're going to be so excited. They're going to study on their own, and we're going to help them, and we'll have all these groups. And that that was 15 years ago, and it wasn't the case. It's a much longer thing, but there seems to be really this renewed interest and resurgence into this practice. Lomi and La'au and Ho'oponopono, they've all had, and I think birthing is really one of the next areas of our practice that we're going to be bringing back into a much wider audience.
Yeah, I saw Liana Honda on the call, and just want to say aloha. I think it's really powerful to have all of these practitioners, and it takes time to build that trust and that trust network too. And so we did also do we had that idea we're going to do train the trainer, but it takes time for each community to build that trust. And so Wahine Hula's work to build trust in that team, I think that's really powerful. It's really important. Hi, Coombs.
I do too. Awesome. I want to ask a question about what cultural lessons are you teaching that are probably new or rare, things that people don't know? And in my head, I can think of the apuhala, for example, but I'm sure there must be other examples. What are some of the new things that, not in detail, but some of the practices or ideas that you convey that people are really surprised by?
I would say that, Ka'ir, you're on mute. Do you want to go?
No, go right ahead.
Oh, I would say that yes, apuhala is a good example, and I would love for Ka'ir to talk more about the apuhala. And but I would also want to say that the most exciting and surprising practice is the practice that already exists in the ohana. And so there's these many families who's like, oh yeah, this is how we bury the ieve. Or this is when you were born, this is what we did. Or this is, the la'au that we always give when the baby is born. And so for me, yes, we are trained in our own practices, and we are sharing the practices that we were taught. But the most exciting ones is when the ohana themselves start to go back into their own ohana practice and learn from the practitioners within their own communities with their own genealogy, because that, like I always was taught that the la'au that grows closest to where you sleep is the la'au you need the most. And so those same with the practices, these are new to the brand new couple, but they're not new to their ohana, and that revitalizing is super, super important. And the other surprise, we might talk about, this very different practice about food or la'au or lomi, or, how to align your piko, all of these different things. But it's the talking stories among the ohana, among the partners as they drive home or after they click off their Zoom, that goes deep. And for Ka'iu and I, that was a powerful surprise, that we were doing the measures of like, okay, how many people are reinstituting Native Hawaiian practices? Like, tell me if you did lomi lomi during your pregnancy. Tell me if la'aulapa'a was, but what the surprise was, like, people are reporting, I have a deeper sense of trust with my partner. I have a deeper sense of communication about our spirituality. Our sexual life is improving because our intimacy is opening. You know, these things are not at all what we anticipated in our, in our curriculum development. But the closeness, that pilina, that's for us, that is the strength. That is where mana is coming from. And it's a beautiful surprise.
And to add on to it, one of the young women in our last class, and she was talking to someone else on staff, and she said, oh my gosh, this class saved our relationship. They had, there was early in the relationship gotten pregnant, but for what Puni was saying, this discussion and the really talking through all these things that she told us on the last night, that I didn't know all these things about that, or we talked and we cried and we cried and we cried. And so just really helping them to develop that communication. The other surprising thing to us was that we have about a 95% participation rate by the men in our class. And this is pretty much unheard of in most Western classes, but our men are coming even when the women aren't coming. Early on, we had men that said, oh, my wife's working or my wife's sick. Can I still come to class? And there's a lot of, for our breastfeeding class, we'd all be in a circle and we'd actually bring in a woman, one of our friends, because our friends we're in the, not me, but putting in all the friends, they were all having babies. And so we would actually bring in someone to sit throughout class and just breastfeed when the baby needed breastfeeding, and tell the not just the men, but the women, it's okay to look, like watch her breastfeed, because nobody's ever given them that permission. And for Hawaiian men to sit in a circle and be able to ask anything that they want about breastfeeding, and not just that, but to have other fathers in the room to help to answer some of the questions, was so much more powerful than we could have ever expected. And so, but we were talking about the apuhala, and so that is one of the practices that we really have worked hard to develop, but also to hold sacred. And so when we first started our research, this was something that I had seen, and I think it was Malcolm Chun Gutmanis, and it was just, it talked about apuhala as a la'au to use after birth. And so we decided, as a group, that we really wanted to someday, know what to do. And luckily, I think I talked to Puakea, and anyway, Auntie Lolena and Ipo Wong, I think they did a presentation all in Olelo, Hawaii one time. Good thing I think I had Malia Nobriga sitting next to me because I understood most of it. But anyway, we invited Ipo, and it's her family tradition that we learned. And so we invited her to one of our practitioner trainings.
Her Ni'ihau family, right?
Family. Yes. And so she got to see what we were doing. She got to trust in really who we were and what we were doing, because it's not something that we, you're not going to write a recipe on it and go share it on the internet. That was, really important for her to know. Anyway, she showed us how to do it. We started doing it with couples, but we, like I said, we don't write down the recipe, that this is something you do the third day after birth. And so you have to come up and we help you to gather, and we make the la'au and tell you how to use it. And then we ask that you hold that's the way that we learn face to face, and holding it really special as something that the ceremony, the protocol, as something that's sacred to us, that you hold that and that you can help your families. But this isn't also something that you go and teach. But right now we've helped almost 70 couples to make apuhala after birth. And so, from the very beginning, to just seeing a word in a book, to now for our group to be able to help these couples with this practice that we know, and that it will continue to grow and thrive, and that's very special for us, because it's just another way that we're helping to empower our couples to use practices that are and sometimes you hear about other practices that people do for to bring into the milk or to help with postpartum depression, but we don't need those practices because we have something that's our own. And that's really important to teach them, is that we have it within within our DNA to help you with these things. And so yeah, that's apuhala.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I know a little bit about doing the apuhala because I had to do it after the birth of my fourth mo'opuna, simply because, you know, that baby was 10 days late and then the father had to travel, right? So then I didn't get the classes. I wasn't in your classes, but I did the apuhala and it all worked out and did what it was supposed to do. But it also leads me to another question. And I think, Hula may have this experience as well. Do family members other than just couples come together? I mean, do you get the tutus and aunties or uncles or other family members who want to participate with the family that's having the baby?
Yes, and they're always welcome as a support person. We had this one young couple, and he was a fireman, and he couldn't make it to the Lomi Lomi class. So she ended up bringing her mom that night. And her mom was stressing a little bit because they weren't married and she was unsure of this, but she went through the whole Lomi session with her daughter. And at the end of the session, when we did our Mahalo circle, she said that she was so grateful for this class because as she stood behind her daughter to massage her daughter, and the picos were lined up between her daughter, and her grandchild that was soon to be born. It was the first time that she felt connected to this child that was coming, and she knew that everything was going to be all right. So yes, they're welcome in the class. They're also welcome to make apuhala. It's up to couples to invite who they want to bring.
That's beautiful. And Hula, on Maui, do you also have the opportunity to work with the extended families? You know, other family members want to come around and learn and participate?
Yeah, so I first want to start off by saying that I personally, or I think Malia too, we serve such a broad range of ohana and different family dynamics. I mean, over the past 2 years, we've been able to serve over 100 birthing people and their ohana, or just the birthing people, and in different capacities. I'm not saying that we were like physically there at every birth. That includes, coming to workshops or virtual or whatever that may be. And I'm super conscious of the fact that everybody is at different points in their life in regards to how open they are to receiving ike in regards to cultural practices, and then even just situational. And so for example, like somebody who is privileged enough to have a home birth, and I use the word privileged because on many levels it is a privilege. And when seeking out care providers, a lot of care providers are not culturally competent, and so there are little microaggressions that occur and kind of turn them off from having a home birth, or midwives will say, oh, your home is not fit to have a home birth because there are many generations living in a household, and things like that. And so there are so many facets to all of these things, but ohana participation should always be at the forefront. And so, for example, like in a home birth situation, everybody in the ohana is responsible for everything else going on around the ohana physically, the person physically giving birth. And so that's for like meal preps or heating up water, getting ice when we need it, or making sure that and not just for the birthing people too, but us. Yeah, so a lot of times like they're taking care of the people who are taking care of the person giving birth, and so there's this whole dynamic. And pre-COVID, there was times when I was in a hospital room with like the mom, the mother-in-law, the partner, the dad, the father-in-law, the cousin, the sister, like 10 people in a hospital room. Definitely not my memorial. That was like a piolani. Or, I've had people who didn't have any ohana where they were at and couldn't go because of COVID. And so, I've had mamas who, at that time, hospitals were only allowing one support person, and she had no other support person but me. Partner wasn't involved, no ohana involved. And so there is a broad spectrum of family dynamics, and a lot of that has to do with socioeconomics and just different things that affect us as po'e Hawaii and as po'e Pacifica, but that is definitely something that is always encouraged. And you know, for me, if a partner is available, or if a mākua is available, or a sister is available, I think a lot of the work I do goes to them, right? Especially in a birth space, you know, things get hectic, and you know, different people have different styles. My style is very much to, you know, we go over things prenatally, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, you know, they forget what we were supposed to do, you know, in terms of lomi. And so I'm like, hey, here's how we do it. And I just stand back and I let them do it. And I hop in when I need to. And so I always say that in an ideal world, my job would not exist, right? I think that in an ideal world, everybody would have somebody in their ohana that would have the knowledge and would be able to, you know, support the birthing people in their ohana. But we don't have that, or most people do not have that. And so, you know, we're kind of just stepping into that role for now until the day that we do get back to that point, because I believe that we will. So yeah.
But for now, we definitely need you and others like you. But, you know, you mentioned the socioeconomic concerns. I mean, you went right there. And there's a question here from one of our viewers who works with pregnant women who face hardships. And, you know, it's not defined what kind of hardships, but is there any, the question is, I would like to know more about how to enroll them in these classes. Many are first-time moms, but I would like to flip that, knowing a little bit about both of you. Are there any barriers to enrolling women with any kind of hardships in your classes?
I can talk a little bit. I mean, for us, we've talked a little bit about the capacity. So we are really focusing in on a smaller group of people for these classes. So the barrier sometimes is that there's just, you know, only so many classes. And then we have families saying, I was hoping I would get pregnant during the period of time when you were having a session. And so, you know, we just have these 3 9-week sessions. So there's just not enough of me and Ka'u on this island, I would say. So that would be one barrier. As far as socioeconomic barriers, there's none for the enrollment in the class. That we've served people in all different kinds of capacities. You know, there's no cost to the class, so that's another one. There are people who have been interested in home births that maybe they couldn't connect to a midwife in time. But I haven't had anybody who was at the beginning of a pregnancy who was interested in a home birth that couldn't figure out a way for that to happen. So that I'm grateful for that. And when as I say that, I really am uplifting the many midwives who have supported Native Hawaiian women over my own birthing span of 25 years. And before that, well before that. And I'd say there are some, I think for our class anyway, the highest level of barrier is about vulnerability, is about the people who kind of like check out or they sign up because they're in the network and they were referred and they, you know, this seems like a good pathway, but the capacity, like how Wahine Hula said, not everybody is ready to receive cultural training or cultural knowledge. Many times that readiness is not in place because of family trauma or because of disconnect from family or because of fear of kuleana or fear that they cannot carry the kuleana well. We have, Ka'u and I are very mindful that there is a place for the kane in the conversation, and all birthing humans, all birthing people, our partners of all genders are also welcome to the kuleana. And so there are some barriers to participants who want a very wahine focused conversation and want an uplifting only of wahine conversation and training, and that doesn't work for us, because in order for the whole ohana to get strong, if there is a kane who's ready to hold kuleana, Ka'u and I are going to make that space. And so that, that has been a barrier before, people, like limiting perspectives on gender and kuleana around birth. But other than that, I can't, we've had all different kinds. We've had families who had 4 kids already. They're on their 5th pregnancy. They've never taken a birth class before, and they're gonna go again. We've had families who like went for the first one and they want to go again for the second one. I'm like, you just had a baby, no, this is important. That we learned that it's the ka'ina of coming together, not just the download of the content. And so the barriers I can't, maybe there's other ones that you can think of, Ka'u. We try to make it as accessible as possible. We've even had people from Alaska, from like from far away.
Wow.
Yeah. And we've our class, I want to say, is 80 to 90% Native Hawaiian, but there have been others that have a cultural grounding enough to come, to understand. But once that, like Puni said, we've just had all types of couples, and we are lucky enough to have been grant funded over these years. So there is no, cost. A lot of other sessions cost money to enroll, but we don't have any of that. I would say the only other barrier that I remember for one couple was actually transportation, was being able to come all the time. But we've had couples come in from Nanakuli, and driving into Nanakuli for a 5:30 to 8 o'clock class after you've been working all day is not an easy thing. But the couple was committed, and so they drove in every ka'ava, they drive in for all of that. And so I think that once they begin the class and they see what it's about, that our couples have been really committed to coming there and being there for almost all of the classes.
That's amazing. And thank you for bringing that up, Wahine Hula. Gave us a chance. I hope that's a reassurance for the listener who asked the question. If you're working with women, there are not barriers. I'm not hearing any barriers from these 2 programs. So we've got, I'm so sorry to say we have just a couple of minutes left. So I want to start with you, Wahine Hula, on Maui. What more than anything do you want your families, the families that you work with, or that, just want some of the information that you are sharing with others? What is your biggest piece of advice or counsel for families that you work with?
That's, there's so many things, but I
know, and so little time. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
But I think number 1 is just to, don't ever be afraid to ask, number 1, for kokua. There are resources out there available to all of us, in regards to different things. But, use your resources. Don't be afraid to ask questions, whether that's prenatally with your kauka or with your midwife, or even in your birth space. Like, do not be afraid to ask questions. Advocate for yourself. And whatever it means for you, again, in different capacities, people are in different places, but find the thing that grounds you, whether that is, ike kupuna or your ohana, or, I don't know, people are into hypnobirthing too. It's not my jam, but it's a thing. But find something to ground yourself in that space, and utilize the kāko'o around you to further ground you. And yeah, mai maka'u, just e hana e like me ka mea e pono, whether that's in the hospital, home birth, like, do what you gotta do and do not be afraid. It is your birth. And yeah.
Awesome, beautiful, mai maka'u. And what I really like you said is, whether it's hospital or home birth, and Puni said earlier, or in the forest, or wherever it is, that none of you here have said that, it's got to be one way or another. So a couple of closing remarks, Puni and Ka'u, you have an announcement to make? Puni, let's start with Puni.
You have the announcement, Ka'u. But my closing remark, kind of similar, I guess. I just want to say grateful. Thank you so much for having us here. And I think that to take on the kuleana, to understand your role in the trajectory is really liberating. I think that that's an important part to understand, that when you're gonna hanau, that's part of the trajectory, the genealogy of Lāhui. And so I'm grateful to be here. Mahalo. Ka'u will announce for us.
Mahalo to you.
Yeah, mahalo. Thank you for this conversation tonight. I think it's so important. I think for what the name of our overall program is Birthing a Nation, and that we're really serious about the work that we're doing is that to strengthen and empower the Lāhui. But also over the years, we've just seen the families grow stronger and stronger and stronger. And we feel that when you are hapai, and if you are feeding your baby aipono or using la'au or feeling the touch of lomi, that your baby is getting all of these things before they're even born. They're starting to learn, they're starting to know, they're starting to experience that of our kupuna before they're born. And so that in itself is going to help us with our Lāhui as we move forward. And so that's why, all of these things are important and we're committed to that. So just grateful for the conversation and the awareness that is going on around birthing these days. My announcement, though, that I wanted to say is that ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa has a little bit of money, and we're doing several small grants up to $1,000, anywhere from $300 to $1,000. And we want people to, it could be something small, like you're just gathering to listen to a speaker, or you want to do a workshop, or it could be whatever you want. We are going to have a little bit of direction on our website. But we want to support other Wahine groups to gather and to have discussions and to empower each other and whatever they need. And so it'll just be a really short application. What we will be asking is that for every group that they have, there's 3 or 4 questions that we want you to ask those people that come involved. And so there'll be just a little bit of guidelines, but we just wanted to announce that we're going to have these mini grants available. There'll probably be about 5 to 7. We'd like to see applications from different islands, and it should be posted on our website within the next week.
Great. Mahalo nui, and mahalo for your earlier comments about how the programs that you're offering to families are just stepping stones to growing a healthier, stronger Lāhui. And mahalo nui to all of you, to Wahine Hula Ka'eo, and aloha to your whole family, and mahalo for participating in this session. Mahalo to Puni Jackson from Ho'olu'aina, mahalo to Ka'iolani Odom from Roots program, and the program that you folks run, Kalahui o Kapo, mahalo nui. Wahine's is Kalao ke Kahuli. So mahalo to all of our panelists. Mahalo to our sponsors. Thank you. There we go. Hawaii People's Fund, Papaʻolelo Kahi, OEV, Maili Kukahi, Aina Momona Academy, Kokua Kalihi Valley, University of Hawaii, and E Kolumea Nui. Mahalo to Le Maile, our tech support in the background, to all of you fabulous people who've been listening in. This will be on the ʻAha Wahine website as well as on our Facebook platforms. What is coming up next? The last Thursday in August, we're featuring the Yi sisters, Nikki Lee and Brandy Lee Yi, and we'll be talking about the Ma'i movement, understanding period poverty in Hawaii. So we'll be looking at our young women and what are the needs. That'll be Thursday, August 25th. So mahalo nui for joining us this evening. Aloha to Kalihi, aloha to Kaneohe, aloha to Waiōhuli, and aloha to all of you. Mahalo nui.